Welcome to the latest episode of the Real World Nutrition Podcast. This is episode 152, Decoding the Dairy Aisle, a comprehensive guide to dairy and dairy alternatives. This is part 3 of my series, Mastering the Grocery Store. Welcome to the latest episode of the Real World Nutrition Podcast. I am your host, Shelley, registered dietitian and founder of Real World Nutrition. And this is part 3 of my Mastering the Grocery Store series. So today I am addressing one of the most challenging and perplexing sections of the grocery store, the dairy aisle. From the different types of milk to so many options for yogurt, cheese, as well as the dairy alternatives, making informed choices can be overwhelming. But don't worry. In this episode, I'm going to share the ins and outs of dairy products, their nutrition benefits, and then some great options for those who have dietary preferences or intolerances. So whether you're a fan of traditional dairy or prefer plant-based alternatives, I'm going to address everything. Well, not everything, but address those things for everyone. So first things first, let me talk about the different types of milk and their nutritional benefits. So let's start with the basics. Milk. So whether you're pouring it over cereal or adding it to your coffee, or using it as an ingredient in so many different ways it can be used, it is often a staple in many diets. But not all milk is created equal. So I'll break down the most common types of milk as well as a bit about their nutritional profile. So first up is cow's milk. And this is the traditional option most of us are familiar with. And even within cow's milk, there's many options. Usually these options are based on their fat content. So let me get into those first. First up, whole milk. This is the richest version. It contains about 3.5% fat. And whole milk is a good source of protein, calcium, and vitamins like D and B12. Vitamin D is in all milks, not just whole milk. And it is an ideal option for those who need or want a higher calorie intake or some of those extra nutrients like growing children. Children under the age of 2 should be having whole milk. And active adults could also have some benefits with whole milk. There's the 2% milk, and this is often a popular choice for those who want to reduce their fat intake but still want some of those other benefits of the cow's milk. You still get plenty of protein, you still get plenty of calcium, but you have less fat and therefore fewer calories compared to whole milk. And then there's skim milk, also known as fat-free milk, because it's virtually no fat. And it is lower in calories, but again, still offers high amounts of protein, high amounts of calcium, as well as the vitamin D and B12 and the other nutrients that whole milk and 2% milk has. The only major difference between these 3 milks is their fat content and their total calorie content. Now, what is very popular now and a lot of people tend to focus on is the plant-based milks. And these dairy alternatives really have surged in popularity due to dietary preferences, could also be lactose intolerance, and potential concerns about the environmental impact of dairy farming. So let me give you a quick breakdown of these. Almond milk is one of the more popular, and it's low in calories and fat, but it's also much lower in protein compared to cow's milk. It's often fortified with calcium and vitamin D, so you want to check the label for added nutrients on this particular milk. Soy milk. If you're looking for a plant-based milk that has naturally occurring protein, has equivalent protein to cow's milk, soy milk is the choice. That protein content is very similar to cow's milk, and also is often fortified with calcium and vitamins. Oat milk is a milk alternative that has a naturally sweet flavor, and it tends to be higher in calories than almond or soy milk. It can have some fiber, but it certainly has less protein than cow's milk or soy milk. And oat milk is often fortified, so you do want to check the label for some of those added nutrients. And then there's coconut milk. And coconut milk is a favorite for its flavor, for its creaminess, especially in cooking. But again, like oat milk and almond milk, the protein content is pretty low. And with coconut milk, the fat content tends to be higher, especially saturated fat. So I recommend, if you're using this, have it for a specific purpose. Enjoy it in moderation. So let's switch over to yogurt and cheese and the other dairy products and what to look for with those. There's a wide variety of yogurt, cheese, and other dairy products. And so I want to point out some of those things on the labels to know what you're consuming. So starting with yogurt. Greek yogurt is by far the most popular these days because Greek yogurt is a powerhouse of nutrition. It's really thick, it's creamier, and it really has a lot more protein compared to so-called regular yogurt. Really, it tends to be about twice the protein content. It also tends to be lower in sugar, even with the flavored varieties, and that's a plus, because a lot of people tend to be looking at sugar content. When shopping for Greek yogurt, you always want to look for the options with live active cultures. Most yogurts do have this. And those are the probiotics that are great for gut health. Now, regular yogurt, a lot of people still prefer regular yogurt compared to Greek yogurt. And this is still another great choice, again, especially for its probiotic content. Now, the regular yogurts tend to be higher in sugar compared to Greek yogurt specifically. So I recommend opting for plain or unsweetened varieties, and then you can sweeten it yourself by adding your own fruit or a little bit of honey. There's non-dairy yogurts, and these can be made from almond or soy or coconut milk, and those are available for people who are avoiding dairy. And just keep in mind that a lot of times these have less protein than the other types of yogurts. So you just may want to be aware of this and make sure you're getting protein in other places. Now, on to cheese. There is so much about cheese. I'm just going to touch very much on the surface about cheese. There's the hard cheeses like cheddar and Parmesan, and those tend to be typically higher in fat and sodium, but are excellent sources of protein and calcium. The key here is moderation. So with Parmesan, cheddar, or some of these hard cheeses, I remind people to use this as a part of a meal or in addition to a dish, not as part of a main source of calcium or protein like we would with yogurt or milk. There's the soft cheeses like brie and goat cheese, and these tend to be real creamy and really powerful with flavor, but really tend to be lower in calcium. So I tell people or recommend people, again, enjoy them in small amounts and savor the flavor and the bites of these cheeses. There are some non-dairy cheeses. So if you're avoiding dairy, non-dairy cheeses made from nuts or soy are great alternatives for people who can't have cheese, can't have dairy, or don't want to have dairy. But again, these tend to be lower in protein and calcium. So I encourage people to read the labels and choose fortified options whenever possible. And then finally, in this area, we also have those other dairy products. We have butter and margarine. I don't tend to find margarine the way I used to, but let me start with butter. Butter is high in saturated fat, And margarine, if you still find it, often can have trans fats. So I recommend looking for spreads that are made with healthy oils, like olive and avocado oil, and ones that are low in trans fats. So one of the things that I prefer to get is a butter canola oil mix. It's half butter, half canola oil. It's still the same amount of calories, but it has a different saturated, unsaturated fat profile, and it's easier to spread than straight butter. And then there's cream and sour cream. I encourage people to use these for specific recipes because they tend to be high in fat. And you can get lower fat versions. They're just not, in my experience, they don't have the same feel, texture, and flavor. So I just say, hey, go with the real deal and use them sparingly. One of my favorite tips for sour cream is I use plain Greek yogurt instead of sour cream. Even if you get the whole milk Greek yogurt, it is still a lot lower in fat and calories and really gives that same sour flavoring that sour cream does, but has a much healthier profile. Not everybody agrees with this, but when I make dips and mixes, instead of using sour cream, I'll use the plain Greek yogurt, and most people have no idea. All right, let's go to the non-dairy or the dairy alternatives for people who have lactose intolerance, for example, or just want a non-dairy preference or desire. So those who are lactose intolerant or those who would prefer to avoid dairy altogether. So lactose-free dairy. Lactose intolerant individuals who still want to have dairy can choose lactose-free milk, and yogurt are great options. So lactose-free milk is still real cow's milk, real milk, and it has the benefit of regular milk without the lactose, and it's easier to digest. You can look for lactose-free yogurt. Most individuals who need to be lactose-free can still tolerate regular yogurt, but if you find that doesn't work for you, you can look for lactose-free yogurt. And then there's the plant-based alternatives. So as I mentioned earlier, plant-based milks like soy milk, almond, oat, and coconut milk are readily available. And these are great options for those who want or need to avoid dairy. But again, I really emphasize being mindful of the protein content. The protein content, with the exception of soy, is virtually non-existent in these plant-based alternatives. So if you're relying on these alternatives, you want to make sure you're getting protein-rich foods in other places when possible. And then the non-dairy yogurts and cheeses, I've mentioned those already, but again, you want to check the labels for protein and calcium content. Again, a lot of times people are just shocked or surprised or not even paying attention that the protein is what I'm using or recommending people look for at this. People tend to think calcium when we're talking dairy, which of course is a big thing. But protein, this is a great source of protein. And when people are choosing non-dairy alternatives, it isn't always equal. It very much isn't equal. So in this last section here, I want to emphasize how we can incorporate dairy and dairy alternatives into your diet. So when I talk about dairy, most people think of drinking a glass of milk, which of course you can do, but that's not all it is. I rarely drink a glass of milk, but I incorporate it in other aspects of my diet so I get the dairy and dairy alternatives in my overall diet throughout the day. So it can be simple, it can be delicious. Here's my recommendations. So for breakfast, you can have milk, whichever one you choose, in your cereal, in your oatmeal, or one of my favorites is including Greek yogurt in my smoothie with yogurt. I said yogurt already. Fruit. I tend to use soy milk in that just because I can handle that higher volume, that full cup compared to cow's milk. Although there is the Fairlife, I'm not promoting this one specifically other than I like it. Fairlife tends to be higher in protein and lactose-free. It is a little bit more expensive compared to some of the other milks. Or if you don't want a big breakfast, you can have just some Greek yogurt with fruit and some honey. At lunch, you can have a slice of cheese to your sandwiches or salads. I like mixing cheese into my salads from fresh mozzarella cheese or feta cheese. Or again, you can make a smoothie if you want something lighter or cooler. And then for dinner, you can use milk or cream for soups and sauces, or you can use cheese on pizza or in a pasta dish, again, whether you use the dairy or non-dairy versions. And as I said already, you can use plain Greek yogurt as a healthier substitute for sour cream. And then for snacks, a couple things that I like is a piece of cheese with crackers. Cheese and crackers is really one of my favorites, or even just a container of yogurt, a cup of yogurt, 3/4 cups of yogurt, and include nuts and berries. So really, paying attention to what's going on in the dairy aisle, it doesn't have to be daunting or overwhelming. It sure feels like it. I went on took people on a grocery store tour recently, and this is where we tend to spend the most time, by really pointing out some of the nuances of the nutritional profile, some of the non-dairy alternatives, looking at milk, yogurt, cheese. Dairy products there's so many options that I want you to make informed choices that fit your dietary needs and preferences. If you want to have oat milk or almond milk, fine. That's not what I'm trying to deter you from, but it's more of just don't think it's equal. And again, as with all things, remember, it's all about balance and finding what works best for you. That could be your dietary preferences, your dietary needs, and fitting in your budget. So if you prefer traditional dairy or plant-based options, there's plenty of ways to incorporate these into your diet. It doesn't have to be 3 glasses of milk throughout the day. It doesn't even have to be a glass of milk. It can be so many different options. So I want you to incorporate these nutritious alternatives or nutritious foods into your overall diet. All right, that wraps up this section of the grocery store and this episode of the Real World Nutrition Podcast. So I hope this helps you feel a little bit more confident next time you're at the grocery store making some choices in the dairy aisle. And I want you to stay tuned for the next episode where I'll continue this Mastering the Grocery Store series and another often confusing section of the grocery store. All right. Until then, take care and bye for now.